Greetings and salutations, friends. Jenny Lee here, and thank you for joining me today. I hope you're doing well, and if you're new here, hi and welcome. I have been going through and doing episodes on the real serial killers that have been featured on my favorite spooky show, American Horror Stories. This episode is a long one, and it's on the killer clown from Illinois. This is John Wayne Gacy. Disclaimer and trigger warning. The following podcast describes graphic violence in adult situations and sexual assaults on minors. For mature audiences only. Discretion is advised. So, the show has not specifically done a series revolving around him, but he was featured in the Devil's Night episode in Season 4, and his clown makeup is mimicked in Freak Show Season 4. John Carroll Lynch plays Twisty the Clown. He is also a recurring actor on the show, and I'm totally here for it. I have a clown phobia, so when I first saw Twisty, I nearly leapt out of my skin. Holy crap, I was not prepared for that. Thankfully, he was not in every scene. Otherwise, I may not have been able to watch the series, which would have sucked because it's so good. Okay, so John Wayne Gacy was born on March 17th, 1942, and to John Stanley Gacy and Marion Elaine Robinson. He was the middle child. Hello, Freud. His father was a World War I vet and an auto repair machinist. His mother was a homemaker. Essentially, she was a stay-at-home mom. There's nothing wrong with that because they are needed. Growing up, he was close to his two sisters and his mom. He did not have a good relationship with his father due to his father's alcoholism and the abuse it caused. His father would constantly belittle him and call him dumb and stupid and would compare him to his sisters, but in a negative way. Sadly, one of John's earliest memories is being beaten by his father with a leather belt for accidentally misarranging the car engine components that his father had been working on. His mom tried her best to intervene, but that would also backfire and result in more taunting and being called a mama's boy who would probably grow up queer. But like most kids, that was a quote, sorry. But like most kids, even if you have a bad parent, you still love them. And John was no exception. In 1949, John's father was told that he and another boy were fondling a young girl, which resulted in his father whipping him with a razor strop, which is like a heavy-duty belt that is used to sharpen straight razors. Yo, I had to Google this. This thing is huge. It's super long. It's super thick. Don't listen to my... Shut up, Jenny. That same year, John said a family friend had started molesting him in their truck. He never told anyone about this because he was scared he was going to get punished. At this point, he's only 7 years old. I'm sorry, but this is heartbreaking. And growing up, John was a heavy-set child, and he had a heart condition. So he was advised to avoid sports in school. This was also encouraged because in the 4th grade, John would start to black out and was even hospitalized because of it a few times. He started to miss a lot of school and his grades started to slip. His father didn't believe that John was truly sick and would accuse him of faking it to gain sympathy while John was actually still in the hospital. John's mother and sisters didn't think he was faking, but there was no actual concrete evidence or documented diagnoses to support the blackouts. So you kind of have to use your better judgment on that one. I, for one, don't think that he was faking per se, but I think it was also maybe a way for him to get away from his father, like not in the house, away from his father. Just my thoughts. Okay. In 1957, a friend of John's actually witnessed the abuse by his father. He saw him coming out of the basement drunk, and he started belittling John and then assaulting him for no apparent reason. John never hit his father back, even after his father told him to put his hands up and defend himself. That takes some restraint. Anyone who's been in that situation, you have mad respect. Unless you start going around killing people, in which case, yeah, no, Sorry, hard pass. In 1960, an 18-year-old John Wayne Gacy became involved in politics and worked as an assistant for the Democratic Party in his neighborhood. It is thought that he chose this to get some positive people and acceptance from others because he wasn't getting it at home from his father, who even called him a, quote, patsy for working in politics. That same year, his father bought him a car, but John had to make the payments and wouldn't put the title in John's name until it was paid off. As a parent, I get that. Here's the part that's messed up. As with any car payment, it takes several years to pay it off. He would also use the car as leverage against him. If John disobeyed and didn't do something he was told, the keys would be taken away. Again, I don't necessarily disagree with that. I'm sorry. I have a teenager who's learning to drive, and if he does get his license while he's still under my care and does something boneheaded, yeah, no, I'm yanking his license and his keys until and giving him a bus pass. Sorry, no Uber. No Uber for you. Okay, anyway, I digest. In 1962, John got tired of this and got a spare set of keys made, and his father retaliated by removing the distributor cap from the car for 3 days. Yeah, petty. But again, I get it a little bit. Anyway, John said he, quote, felt totally sick and drained after all this took place. And once his dad put the distributor cap back on, John left. He packed his shit and went to Vegas, baby. Yeah, no, too old? Not right? Okay. Once he got to Vegas, he got a job working with an ambulance service and then got transferred to work at Palm Mortuary as an attendant. They allowed him to sleep on a cot behind the embalming room. Creepy. And he worked there for 3 months, just observing the whole process. One night, he climbed into a coffin of a deceased teenage boy, cuddled it, and caressed the boy before he freaked out. He immediately called his mom and asked if his dad would allow him to come home. His dad agreed, and he drove back to Chicago that night. Creepiness aside, which there's a lot, how sad is it that you feel so alone and unloved that you sought comfort from a corpse? It's not okay. There's just so much wrong, and then there was so many red flags, like right from the get-go. I mean, come on. Anyway, once he got back to Illinois, he enrolled at Northwestern Business College, even though he never graduated high school. He did graduate from college in 1963 and was offered a position at Nunn Bush Shoe Company in their management trainee program. They transferred him to Springfield in 1964 and worked as a salesman and was promoted to manager of that department. That same year, he got engaged to Marilyn Myers, who was also a co-worker of his. While they were dating, John joined the local Jaycees and worked for them nonstop. He also became a key man in April. John would eventually work his way up to the organization to vice president of the Springfield chapter. He also had his second sexual experience with a man. According to John, a fellow Jaycees member got him drunk and invited him to spend the night, quote unquote, on the couch, which is when the man performed oral sex on John. He had a very busy year in 1964. He could even say everything was finally going his way. Marilyn and John got married in September 1964 and was given the position of manager of 3 Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurants in Waterloo, Iowa. Iowa. That doesn't sound right. Oh well, if it's wrong, sorry, I tried. Iowa. By Marilyn's father. The newlyweds moved into her parents' former home, and he was making a good salary, plus he received a portion of the profits. I don't know if that's how stuff works now, but that's really successful in 1964. So being a manager of a fast food establishment means there's a high probability that the bulk of your workforce is going to be teenagers working after school and in the summer. John would actually open up his basement to his employees as a sort of club and would let them partake in libations. get drunk and play pool. While all employees were welcome, he would only make sexual advances to the young men, and when they brushed him off, he would claim he was testing their morals or that he was joking. Don't test people's morals, people. You're going to turn someone into a serial killer. Serial killer. I can say words. Shut up, Jenny. Marilyn gave birth to their son in February of 1966 and a daughter in March of 1967. John would reflect at this time in his life and describe it as perfect. His father had also privately apologized for all the emotional and physical abuse and even said, quote, "Son, I was wrong about you," and shook John's hand. While I'm sure it was a great moment and most certainly way overdue, the mental damage had already been done and the monster was already churning beneath the surface. It also turns out that the JCs have their own dirty little secrets. I mean, don't we all? But I mean, I wasn't expecting this. Okay. While John Gacy was the vice president, the chapter was deeply involved in prostitution, pornography, drugs, and wife swapping. No judgment here, and by no means am I throwing shade. Do whatever floats your boat as long as everyone involved is of legal age and consenting. But I just, it makes me leery about joining any type of organizations or volunteer work or anything. I'm like, what am I actually signing up for type of thing? Gacy would also become known as the Colonel because he would bring KFC to their meetings. And because of his fundraising work, they named him the Outstanding Vice President of Waterloo JCs in 1967. So here's the part of his story where you start seeing his darker side. And full disclosure, the reason it took me so long to put this episode together was because I had to take a step back while doing my research more than once because some of his victims are my son's age or younger. And again, I'm not hiding it. I'm a parent. I love being a parent, and I would protect my kids at all costs. And I just had to take a step back because it's very upsetting, and no child should ever, ever, ever be in these situations. And I'm a big proponent of if you see something, say something. Hands down. Okay, let's continue on. I may need my comfort cookie here in a little bit. If that's the case, then we're going to pause and have a cookie break. Okay, let's go. Donald Voorhees, the 15-year-old son of a fellow JC, was sexually assaulted by Gacy in August 1967. He actually lured the boy to his home with the promise of free porn and booze. Okay, so some of you may not know this, but, well, Craig Ferguson says it the best. Back in the old days, you had to forage for your porn. It wasn't readily available like it is today. You had to get it at stores. You had to get it at dirty stores. You had to show proof of age. You had to do all this stuff. And some of it was like back alley stuff where you couldn't get it in certain cities. So you had to literally forage for porn. So that's why it was a big deal that he would offer it to these young men to see. Because like, really? Boobies? Wonderful! And that's why it's such a thing that he used. It was awful. It's just awful. Teach your kids, people, to make better choices. He lured the boy to his home with the promise of free porn and booze, and while the boy was inebriated, he convinced him to participate in mutual oral sex, saying, quote, "You have to have sex with a man before you start having sex with a woman," end quote. He did the same thing with several other boys. He even told one of the boys he could have sex with his wife, and then blackmailed him with it to get the boy to perform oral sex on him. He even convinced some of them he was conducting homosexual experiments for science and would pay them $50. That's a lot of money to a kid, even by today's standards. This would go on for 7 months before Donald Voorhees would tell his dad about what was going on. Voorhees Sr. immediately went to the police, and Gacy was arrested and charged with oral sodomy of Donald and the attempted assault of Edward Lynch, who was also 16 years old. Gacy denied the charges and actually demanded to take a polygraph, which was inconclusive. Okay. He even denied the charges publicly and said that the charges were politically motivated. On May 10, 1968, Gacy was indicted for sodomy. Gacy promised to pay one of his employees, 18-year-old Russell Schroeder, to assault Voorhees to keep the boy from testifying. Russell actually lured Donald to a park where he maced him and beat him up. Donald got away and reported the attack to the police. Russell was arrested the next day and spilled the beans during questioning. Gacy was arrested again, and an additional charge was added of hiring Russell to intimidate and assault Donald. On September 12, 1968, Gacy was ordered to get a psychiatric evaluation. 2 separate doctors evaluated him over a 17-day period and came to the conclusion that he had antisocial personality disorder, aka sociopath. Duh. And would be unlikely that any treatment would be beneficial, and that he would most likely repeat this act. But other than that, he was mentally competent to stand trial. November 7th, 1968, Gacy pled guilty to 1 count of sodomy with Donald Voorhees and not guilty to the other charges for the other boys. His defense was that Voorhees came on to him and he only went along with it out of curiosity. No one believed him. I sure don't. And he was convicted on December 3rd, 1968 and sentenced to 10 years at Anamosa State Penitentiary. That same day, his wife filed for divorce, got full custody of the kids, and was awarded alimony. Everything was finalized on September 18, 1969, and Gacy never saw them again. Good for you, girl. Protect your babies. While he was in prison, Gacy kept busy. Within months of his arrival, he arose to the position of head cook, joined the JC inmate chapter, and increased the membership from 50 to 650. Holy crap. Helped secure a daily pay increase for the inmates working in the mess hall, and supervised several projects to improve prison conditions. He even oversaw the installation of a mini golf course in the prison yard. I want a mini golf course, but I don't want to be in prison. Anyway. Even though he had earned the reputation as being a model prisoner, it wasn't enough to get him paroled, which was denied in June 1969. In preparation for his next parole hearing, he completed 16 high school courses and finally got his diploma in November of 1969. On Christmas Day, 1969, his father passed away from cirrhosis of the liver, alcoholism. And when he found out, Gacy started sobbing and dropped to the floor. He was also denied leave to attend the funeral. After only serving 18 months of a 10-year sentence, Gacy got paroled under the conditions that he would move back to Chicago to live with his mom and had a 10 p.m. curfew. He actually told his friend Clarence Lane that he was never going back to jail and had plans to reestablish himself in Waterloo. But within 24 hours of his release, he was back in Chicago and got a job as a short order cook. Sorry, I had to get some water. I'm talking a lot. Okay. On February 12, 1971, less than a year of being released from prison, Gacy was charged for another sexual assault of a young boy. He claimed Gacy had lured him into his car at the Greyhound station, drove him back to his home where he tried to force the boy into sex acts. However, the case got dismissed when the boy failed to appear. On June 22, 1971, Gacy was again arrested and charged with aggravated assault and battery and reckless conduct. A boy filed a complaint saying he was lured into Gacy's car after being flashed a police badge and was forced to perform oral sex on him. These charges also got dropped after the boy tried to blackmail Gacy. Oddly, the parole board did not get this info until after the parole period had ended. Huh. My man. And his previous criminal convictions were sealed. This man has a horseshoe up his ass, I swear. Around this time is also when he started his part-time construction business, PDM Contractors, painting, decorating, and maintenance. He actually got permission from his probation officer to work evenings doing the construction while working days as the cook. He started with small jobs like sign writing, redecorating, pouring concrete, but then he expanded to include interior design, landscaping, installation, and remodeling. In mid-1973, he was able to quit his cooking job and focus fully on his construction business. The man was a lunatic, but he did seem to have a mind for making money. Just putting it out there. I don't know how he did it. I wouldn't mind getting some pointers, but that's not going to happen. I don't talk to crazy people anymore. I have secrets. Anyway, with some assistance from his mom, Gacy bought his soon-to-be House of Horrors, a ranch house near the village of Norridge in Norwood Park Township, a suburb of Chicago. He lived at 8213 West Somerdale Avenue until he got arrested in December of 1978, where he admitted to committing all the murders. He was not suspected because he remained active in the local community and was a helpful guy. He would loan out his tools, plow snow for his neighbors' walkways, and he would host annual summer parties for hundreds of people, including politicians. Remember, he's in politics. On July 1st, 1972, Gacy married his second wife, Carroll, a former high school fling, and he was also now a stepdad to her 2 daughters. So this is a TMI, but very oddly telling. In 1975, he told his new wife that he was bisexual, and Mother's Day that same year, after they had some sexy time, he told her that that was the last time that they would ever be intimate. He then started spending his nights out of the house and wouldn't return until early morning with the same expected excuse, working late. I get it, he is a workaholic, but most people who are workaholics aren't doing it 7 days a week. And if you are, slow down. Enjoy your life. There's always going to be more work, but you do eventually run out of time. But Carroll, she wasn't stupid or blind. She would see him come home with teenage boys and go into the garage with them. She also found gay porn, men's wallets with the IDs in them inside the house. And after an argument in October 1975, Carroll asked for a divorce. Gacy agreed and allowed Carroll and her girls to continue to live in the house until they got their own place in February of 1976. A month later, the divorce was finalized on the grounds of infidelity with other women. Someone didn't want his secret to get out. By 1975, his business PDM was expanding, and he was working 16-hour days. And in March 1977, he became a supervisor for PE Systems, a drugstore remodeling company. So with him working both jobs, he would sometimes have 4 jobs going at once and would have to travel out of state a lot. By 1978, PDM's annual revenue was over $200,000. That's a lot of money, even by today's standard. If I had his gift for making money, I would be a happy girl. Gacy was also still somewhat active in local politics and would offer up his company to clean the Democratic headquarters offices for free. He was rewarded with his community service by being appointed to serve on the Norwood Park Township Street Lighting Committee, which came with the title of Precinct Captain. On May 6, 1978, Gacy met and got his picture with First Lady Rosalind Carter at the annual Polish Constitution Day Parade, which he had been supervising. Later on, the event would be considered quite the embarrassment to the United States Secret Service, which in retrospect makes sense. But there is no way they could have known how bad it really was at this point. There's just no way. One of the other extracurriculars that Gacy takes on is the role of Pogo the Clown. It all started while he was in the Moose Club and noticed the Jolly Joker Clown Club, who regularly did fundraisers and marched in parades, in addition to going to children's hospitals to entertain the hospitalized children. Gacy joined the Jolly Jokers in late 1975 and created his own character, Pogo the Clown, the happy clown, and Patches the Clown, the serious clown, per Gacy's description. Gacy was also committed to making sure he would put on a good show. He learned how to do a few magic tricks and how to do balloon animals for the children. He rarely asked for money because he liked doing it. Gacy would say dressing up as a clown would allow him to, quote, regress into childhood. And after knowing all the crap he went through with his father, I kind of understand that point. However, that does not excuse the fact that he had access to children after he was convicted of a sexual assault of a minor. So, Gacy would actually do his act at charitable events, political functions, private local parties, and of course the children's hospitals. He would sometimes choose to remain in costume and go to local bars after a gig before going home. If I saw a clown at a bar, I'm done. Tapping out. Nope. Hard pass. No thank you. I'm out. Most of his workers for PDM were high schoolers and college-age men. He would eventually proposition his employees for sex and even insist on sexual acts when/if they asked for a favor, such as borrowing a car or an advancement on a paycheck or even a promotion. Side note, if an employer or manager or anyone who is in a position of power above you at your job is making these kinds of stipulations, it's time to find a new job. No matter how long you've been there, you do not deserve to be put through that. Quit and then report that POS on your way out. Spread the word, especially if you know a young person entering the workforce. End rant. Okay. So, he would make it known to his employees that he owned guns and even admitted to saying, quote, "Do you know how easy it would be to get one of my guns and kill you? And how easy it would be to get rid of the body?" End quote. This is Minnie. She is my youngest's kitty. She's also a mama's girl. She's keeping me company because she knows the sad parts are really coming. Gacy and one of his teenage employees traveled to Florida to look at a property that he had bought. The first night they were down there, Gacy raped him in the hotel room. This is in 1973, and he's still married to his second wife. When they returned home, the boy went to Gacy's home and kicked his ass in the front yard. Gacy told her the kid flipped out because he refused to pay the boy for a poor painting job. In May 1975, 15-year-old Anthony Antonucci was hired and in July, Gacy went to the boy's home with a bottle of wine and straight porn. I'm making that differential because he had all types of pornography in his possession. So he literally went there with straight porn. Gacy then started wrestling with the boy, wrestling around, trying to be silly. Got him to the ground, cuffed his hands behind his back, but one cuff was loose, and Anthony got his hands free when Gacy left the room. Now, Anthony was a high school wrestler, so it's not known if Gacy knew this beforehand or not, but he was about to find out. Anthony took him by surprise by pouncing on him, pinned him to the floor, got the cuff keys, and cuffed Gacy's hands behind his back. And he started threatening Anthony, but after he calmed down a bit, he promised he would leave if he removed the handcuffs. Anthony agreed, and Gacy said he told the boy as he left, quote, "Not only are you the only one who got out of the cuffs, you got them on me," end quote. One of the magic tricks Gacy would use is how he would eventually get his victims to handcuff themselves. The trick goes, Gacy would put the cuff on himself behind his back and would then take them off. Then ask the boys if they wanted to learn how to do the trick and would handcuff their hands in front of them and tell them that the trick was, quote, "You had to have the key," end quote. It's shady. Don't trust clowns, people. Sorry. On July 26, 1976, 18-year-old David Cram was hitchhiking on Elston Avenue when Gacy offered him a job with PDM. He actually started working that evening, and David moved in with Gacy on August 21st. One of those favors we previously talked about. The next day, they were celebrating David's 19th birthday, and Gacy dressed up as Pogo, and he did his handcuff trick. And then David put the cuffs on himself with his hands in front of his body. And then Gacy grabbed the chain on the cuffs, swung him around, and told David he was going to rape him. David kicked Gacy in the face, freed himself, and ran to his room. A month later, Gacy went into David's room and told him again that he was going to rape him. He said, quote, "Dave, you really don't know who I am. Maybe it would be good if you give me what I want," end quote. And when David fought him off again, Gacy said, "You ain't no fun." David finally moved out on October 5th and quit working for PDM, with the exception of a few odd jobs for about 2 years afterwards. Not long after David moved out, a new 18-year-old moved in, Michael Rossi, and he lived there until April 1977. He would even go clowning with Gacy, and Gacy would be Pogo, and Michael would be Patches. So many feelings. Okay. Before we get into any details about his victims that didn't make it away, it should be mentioned that Gacy admitted to killing 33 boys and young men. And he buried 26 of them in the crawl space of his house. For those of you who are not familiar, crawl space is kind of like a basement, but not as large. It's literally like packed earth. And then like a few feet above that is like your floorboards of your actual home. So it's an empty space in between the two. And some people use it for storage. A lot of people don't use it for anything because it's right on top of the dirt. But that's what Gacy had on his home. He literally had those poor people decomposing under his floorboards. He had so many buried under there that he doubled up on some of the bodies. He got his victims lured in with either the promise of a job at PDM, alcohol and drugs, or for money if they were sex workers. He trolled the local Greyhound station, Bughouse Square, or on the streets, and he would trick some of them to get in thinking he was a sheriff because he had a badge, and he would flash it. And sometimes he would just force them into the car. Once he got them to his home, he would do the handcuff trick, rape them, and torture them. Frequently, he would start by sitting on their chest and force them to perform oral sex on him. Don't forget, Gacy is a big guy. Like, he's tall and he's heavy. So, if the poor boy is pinned, he's not going anywhere, unfortunately. If you don't have a matching force, you can't break free easily. You're probably going to hurt yourself or probably get yourself killed real fast. So he really did overpower them by a lot, and it's sad. He would also immobilize his captives' legs before he started to torture them. He would manacle their ankles to a 2x4 with handcuffs on each end, inspired by Houston mass murders. As if that wasn't enough, he would also verbally taunt them throughout the abuse and even dragged or made them crawl into his bathroom, where he would partially drown them and then revive them several times for his own enjoyment. Once he was done torturing those poor guys, he would then place a makeshift tourniquet around their necks, progressively tightening the rope with a hammer handle. He would call this one the rope trick and would tell them, quote, "This is the last trick," end quote. Mindfuck. During one of these tricks, he actually read Psalms 23 from the Bible as the rope was tightening. Psalms 23 is the, "As I walk through the valley of shadow of death," that's the one. And it's read a lot at funerals, actually, because it's quite comforting that even after all your struggles, you're still welcomed into heaven and that somebody loves you and is waiting for you. So I find it very twisted that he read something that means a lot to people, especially those who have struggled and who that Bible verse really speaks to. Yeah, he's a monster. There were a few victims that would convulse for an hour or two before actually passing away. But most of the victims died of asphyxiation. I can speak. Mostly died of asphyxiation from having a cloth gag shoved down their throat. Literally. I don't mean just like gently pushing. They were like in your esophagus. Except his last two victims, which he killed within hours of each other. Once they died, he would keep them under his bed for 24 hours before burying them in the crawl space, where he would periodically pour quicklime to assist in the decomposition. He took a few of them to his garage and embalmed them before they were buried. Because of the sheer amount of victims, I am going to go through the list of his known victims, and there's some details on some of them, but it's quite a lot. And if you really want to know the nitty and gritty of all of it, feel free to click on the links listed in the description, or, do your own research. See if you can find stuff that I didn't find, because I have a very limited detective brain. It works. But yeah, still, yeah. Okay. I am going to list their names. I know in my Eileen Warnos video I did not list the victims' names because I didn't have permission. I don't have permission from the families on this, but these poor boys need to be remembered. And unfortunately, there are still some that are not identified. And we'll talk about that too. All right. Timothy Jack Mccoy, 16 years old. And he stopped at the Greyhound bus station and the Loop en route home on January 3rd, 1972. Gacy confessed to picking him up and taking him back to his house and stabbed him in the chest. The police found a large bloodstain on the underside of Gacy's bedroom carpet, and Timothy had distinctive teeth, which helped identify his body in May of 1986. John Butkovich, 18 years old. He left home going to Gacy's home. He left his home to go to Gacy's house to demand his final paycheck. His body was the first to be discovered by the police on December 21st, 1978, in the garage, where Gacy told them there was a body. Daryl Sampson, 19 years old. Not much is known about his disappearance on April 6, 1976. Like, they don't know where he was going. They don't know where he was grabbed. But his remains were identified between November 1979 and March 1980. Samuel Stapleton, 14 years old. He was one of Gacy's youngest victims, and he disappeared while walking home from his sister's house in Chicago on May 13, 1976. His parents reported him missing the next day, and once the crawl space was unearthed, they had suspected he was one of the victims from a bracelet found on one of the bodies, which was later confirmed by dental records. Victim number 5 is still unidentified. He is estimated to be between 22 and 32 years old, between 5'7" and 5'11". He disappeared between January 20th and 1976 and March 15th, 1977. Randall Referet, 15 years old. He disappeared on May 14th, 1976. His remains were found in the crawl space by the front door of Gacy's home. His body was identified in comparison of one of his on one x-ray that he had previously done after he got a stab wound. And it included a partial of his jaw and teeth, like this kind of area, and helped get him identified on April 11th, 1979. Michael Bonan, 17 years old, disappeared on June 3rd, 1976. A fishing license with his name on it was actually found in Gacy's home. William Carroll, 16 years old, disappeared on his older brother's birthday, June 13th, 1976. It is reported that William was often getting into trouble and told his father that he would be home in an hour. But he was reported later to be getting into a dark-colored car with 4 other teens in it. His identification was confirmed in March 17, 1979. Jimmy Hackinson, 16 years old. He was a native of St. Paul, Minnesota, and he called his mother on August 5, 1976 to let her know that he had gotten to Chicago. His body was identified 40 years after his remains were discovered, thanks to DNA testing provided by his brother and his sisters at the insistence of a nephew. DNA has come such a long way in helping catch people and identify victims. So I'm a big proponent of, get the DNA, do your swabs, do whatever you need to do, because every victim deserves justice. Continuing on. Rick Johnson, 17 years old, disappeared on August 6, 1976 after a concert in the Aragon Ballroom by his mom. Dental records helped confirm his ID on January 1st, 1979. Victim number 10 is still unidentified. He was between 17 and 21 years old. He's a white male, 5 feet to 5'11", and he disappeared between March 15, 1977 and July 5, 1977. William George Bundy, 19 years old, disappeared on October 1976 after telling family members he's headed to a party, but he left his wallet behind. It is unconfirmed but suspected that William worked for Gacy, and it took a renewed effort by the Cook County Sheriff, Tom Dart, but after 35 years his body was identified. Thank goodness. Michael Marino, 14 years old, and Kenneth Parker, 16 years old, disappeared on October 24, 1976 together after hanging out at the Clark Street and Diversey Parkway intersection where Gacy would look for his victims. Their bodies were found together and it is believed they were killed at the same time. Michael's remains were identified with dental records on March 29, 1980, but his mother is convinced that the remains were not her son. Kenneth's remains were verified with dental records as well, and an x-ray of a broken arm on the same day. His body was exhumed in 2016 for DNA testing because his mother also didn't think that he was really one of Gacy's victims. I get it. You don't want your baby to be that one. You want them to still be missing because then there's still the possibility that they're alive. I get it. Victim number 13 is still identified. He's between 17 and 21 years old, a white male, 5'11" to 6'2", and disappeared between August 6, 1976 and October 5, 1976. Gregory Godzik, 17 years old, disappeared on December 11, 1976, and he left to go on a date with his girlfriend but never came home. His car was found abandoned and the family hired a private investigator but got nowhere. His girlfriend actually went to Gacy's home and questioned him because Gregory worked for Gacy, who claimed the boy told him he was going to run away. His remains were identified in January 1979. Gacy claims he had the boy dig his own grave. John Zack, 19 years old, disappeared on January 20th, 1977. His Maine West High School ring was found in Gacy's home. His remains were identified by dental records on January 1979. John Prestige, 20 years old, disappeared on March 15, 1977 after coming to Chicago to visit a friend for a job interview with a contractor. Could be Gacy. It's unconfirmed. But his remains were also identified with dental records. Matthew Bowman, 18 years old, reported missing on July 5, 1977 by his sister. His body was identified on January 27, 1979. Robert Gilroy, 18 years old. He'd been missing for weeks when his disappearance was reported. He was the son of a Chicago police sergeant, and he hadn't been showing up for his horseback riding lessons when he was reported missing on September 27, 1977. It took so long to report him missing because his lessons were actually out of state. His body was confirmed by dental records, January 6, 1979. John Murray, 19 years old, disappeared on September 25th, 1977. He had just returned home to Chicago to visit his family after completing 18 months with the Marines. His sister Judith had been murdered 6 years before. His remains were confirmed by dental records on January 27th, 1979. Russell Nelson, 21 years old, disappeared after October 17, 1977, when he last called his mother to wish her a happy birthday. He was engaged and going to the University of Minnesota. He was Gacy's first victim from out of state. It is not known if he was working for Gacy, but he did go to Chicago with a friend to work for a contractor. His remains were identified on January 6, 1979 by dental records. Victim 21 is still unidentified, between the ages of 21 to 27 years old. He's a white male, 5'6" to 6 feet, and disappeared between August 6, 1976 and October 25, 1976. Robert Winch, 18 years old, he had moved from Kalamazoo, Michigan to Chicago after running away from a foster home. He was last seen alive on November 11, 1977. His tiger's eye belt buckle was found inside Gacy's home. His remains were identified on September 12, 1979, from healed bones from a previous fracture. Your body is a map. It's pretty interesting. I'm weird. We can keep going. Tommy Bowling, 20 years old, disappeared November 18, 1977, from his home. He was using drugs at the time, so that may be how he encountered Gacy. There's no real way to confirm that. His remains were identified on September 12, 1979 by his wedding ring and dental records. David Talisma, 19 years old. He disappeared on December 9, 1977. His remains were recovered on what would have been his 21st birthday, November 16, 1979. They were identified from an x-ray of his left arm. William Kindred, 19 years old, reported missing on February 16, 1978 after he didn't show up at his girlfriend's house, who actually knew Gacy, but it's unclear if William did. The police found that Gacy had picked him up by Diversey Parkway and Broadway. His remains were confirmed on May 21, 1979. Victim 26 is still unidentified, between 22 and 30 years old, white male, 5'2 to 5'6", disappeared between June 13, 1976 and August 6, 1976. Timothy O'Rourke, 20 years old, disappeared on June 20th, 1978. He used to go to gay bars, the same one Gacy would go to, and his body was found by the Dresden Island Lock and Dam in the Illinois River. Well, I said that slowly because I wanted to make sure I got it right. His body was actually found on the same day he disappeared. He was identified by his fingerprints and a tattoo on his left arm that read Tim Lee. Victim 28 is still unidentified, between 14 and 18 years old. He's a white male, 5'6 to 5'11". He disappeared January 3rd, 1972 and July 1975. Frank Landigan, 19 years old, disappeared on November 4th, 1978. His body was found in Des Plaines River in Will County on November 12, 1978. The police were able to link his murder to Gacy when they found some of his personal belongings in Gacy's home. His body was identified by his father, fingerprints, and dental records. James Mazara, 20 years old, disappeared on November 23rd, 1978. His nickname was Mojo. Gacy admitted to, quote, dumping the body, end quote, into the Des Plaines River, and because of that, his actual cause of death could not be determined. His body was found on December 28th, 1978, and was identified by fingerprints. Robert Peist, 15 years old. He was an honor student at Maine West High School. He had ended his shift on December 11th, 1979 at Nissan Pharmacy. He asked his mom to wait inside the pharmacy while he went outside to talk to a man about a construction job. He disappeared the same day. The police found a receipt for a roll of photos inside Gacy's home. Like he took pictures to get developed. And this was on December 13th, 1978. The Peist family verified that the receipt belonged to a friend of Robert's, but that puts him inside Gacy's home. So Gacy was arrested on December 1st, 1978, and admitted dumping his body in the river as well. His body was recovered and was positively ID'd on April 9th, 1979. It is believed that Robert was Gacy's final victim. So here's where it gets a bit more involved. And like I said, this is a long one. Robert Peist was the victim that triggered the fall of Gacy's awful tirade. The police were able to get a search warrant, and on December 13th, 1978, they found several suspicious items such as a 6mm Beretta starter's pistol, a hypodermic needle, a syringe, several police badges, handcuffs, amyl nitrate capsules, a 39-inch 2x4 with 2 holes drilled into each end, bottles of Valium and atropine, as well as several driver's licenses in one of the bedrooms. They also found clothes that wouldn't fit Gacy's large frame inside the closet. That is also where they found the Maine West High School ring and the photo receipt. The police confiscated Gacy's car and his work vehicles. They also assigned 2 manned surveillance teams to track him. That is also when they started to look into his background. On December 15th, the investigators got more information about the battery charge, and on December 16th, Gacy was starting to try to be chummy with the surveillance team, even inviting them to join him for meals at restaurants and for drinks at the local bar or his home. I got nothing. My God. I get the point, though. He's trying to make them his friends so that he would get information from them, or try and convince them that he's a good guy and they don't need to investigate him. This is the boys club. We're good. See that? I'm not buying it. I'm not buying what you're selling, Gacy. Arr. He would constantly deny having anything to do with Robert Peist's disappearance and started to accuse the police of harassment because of his political views or his recreational drug use. Gacy also knew they wouldn't arrest him for anything small like violating traffic laws, which he would do right in front of them. He would even succeed in losing them, like in mini chases. Like, it wouldn't be a high-speed chase, but he would run a red light so the cops would get stuck behind the light. Also, on this same day, Cram gave the police an interview and told them how much of a hard worker Gacy was and how he was sexually open-minded, and even said that Gacy gave him a watch, quote, from a dead person. Rossi was formally investigated on December 17th, and he told them about how Gacy sold him John 6 car, saying he bought it from him so the kid could move to California. On the same day, Gacy's car was put under the microscope, and when they were examining the trunk, they found a clump of fibers that looked like human hair. They then got 3 German Shepherd search dogs to examine the car and to help determine if Peist had been in any of Gacy's vehicles, personal and professional. One of the dogs approached the Oldsmobile and laid down on the passenger seat, which was his quote-unquote death reaction, according to his handler. Now, if you're not familiar, a death reaction is something that trained dogs will do. Sometimes they lay down, sometimes they sit. My dad, he had one of their dogs. Her name was Klondike Kate, prettiest little thing. She would actually pee and then sit down. That was her. She would pee all over the floor and then sit down when she came near something, when she smelled that smell. Essentially, the dog indicated that the boy had been in the car. The police were also able to link the serial number on the photo receipt found in Gacy's house back to Peist, whose friend Kimberly Byers it was her receipt, and she verified it was in the pocket of a jacket that she actually gave to Peist. That day, Gacy invited Detective Hachmeister and Albrecht to breakfast at a restaurant. I promise, I talked to Professor Google, and I still can't get these pronunciations 100%, so I apologize. I tried. I did my best. Okay. He would shoot the shit with them, talking about his business, his failed marriages, and his extracurriculars as a clown. He even said during the meal, quote, clowns can get away with murder, end quote. Who says that? I mean, what the fuck? Okay, so my theory is that by this time, Gacy was trying to throw the police off his scent by playing the good old boys routine, like I mentioned. Like bros before hoes nonsense. He stopped shaving, he wasn't sleeping, he was drinking more than usual, and was very anxious. He was nervous, as he should be. Perhaps his luck had finally run out. After he had breakfast with the detective, he went to his lawyer's office because he was trying to prepare a civil suit against the police for $750,000, for doing their job. It was trying to demand they stop the surveillance. This was a very busy day for the case and Gacy all the way around. Rossi was interviewed again and was even more cooperative, which means he gave up more information. He informed them that in the summer of 1977, Gacy paid him to spread lime all over the crawl space under his house. Suspicious. On December 19th, a second search warrant was done and the evidence was starting to pile up. And that is also when his civil suit was filed against the police. The hearing was scheduled for December 22nd, and that same afternoon, Gacy invited the detectives into his house again, and they actually took this opportunity. And Detective Robinson distracted Gacy while Officer Schultz walked into Gacy's bedroom to try and get the serial number of the Motorola TV that they thought belonged to John Zick. When he flushed Gacy's toilet, the officer noticed a very distinctive smell coming from the heating duct. The smell of death. They say the reason the smell wasn't noticed before was because the home had been super cold. So if you've never been to Chicago, winters in Chicago can get very, very, very cold. And, okay, so analogy for people who are not familiar. If you have spoiled meat, like say you accidentally left it out and forgot to put it in the fridge, in the freezer, but then you put it in the freezer, you won't smell how rotten it is. But once it thaws and starts warming back up a little bit, oh, it's going to be rank. Oh, it's going to burn your nose hairs off. It's gross. That's the smell of death. Rotting meat. Blah. I'm good. I'm totally fine. Ugh. Okay. The authorities interviewed Cram and Rossi again on December 20th, and they agreed to be interviewed about the links with John Sack and Robert Peist. Rossi is the one who let them know they should probably be looking in their crawl space in regards to the missing boys. He was the one who helped dig trenches in the crawl space and let them know how adamant Gacy was about where he should dig and to not deviate from the instructed area. He also let them know he suspected Sack's car was stolen by Gacy. So Gacy literally told them, dig here and only here. Do not go anywhere else. This is your spot. It reminds me a little bit of Happy Gilmore, where he's talking to the golf ball. That's your home. Don't you want to go to your home? That's pretty much the mentality. This is your spot. You stay there. Cram told the detectives on the rape attempts by Gacy in 1976. He also recounted how Gacy went pale at the sight of mud on his carpet that came from the crawl space on December 13th. Gacy freaked out, grabbed a flashlight, and went into the crawl space and started looking for signs of fresh digging. At some point, Gacy also asked him to spread lime and dig trenches in the crawl space that were 2 feet wide and 6 feet deep, which is essentially the same size as a grave. On December 20th, Gacy went to his lawyer's office for a scheduled meeting about a civil suit, and when he shows up, he's completely disheveled and asks for a drink. Like a strong drink. Not coffee, not tea, not a mocha latte. He wanted straight up liquor. His lawyer, Sam Amarante, gave him some whiskey and asked what was going on. Gacy picked up the newspaper on Amarante's desk and said that had the article on the front page about the disappearance of Robert Peist and said, quote, "This boy is dead. He's dead. He's in a river," end quote, and then confessed for so long that it went overnight into the early mornings of December 21st. Gacy said, quote, "I've been the judge, jury, and executioner of many people," end quote, and he now wanted that for himself. He told Amarante about the boys in the crawl space and the 5 he put in the river. He talked about the boys as, quote, "male prostitutes, hustlers, and liars who got the rope trick," end quote, and how on occasion he would wake up in the morning to find, quote, "dead, strangled kids," end quote, on his floor with their hands cuffed behind their back. He buried them in the crawl space because he viewed them as his property. During the confession, he drank more whiskey and got drunk as a skunk and would fall asleep midway through a sentence. After Gacy's confession to him, Amarante immediately arranged a psychiatric visit for Gacy at 9 a.m. that day. Gacy woke up in Amarante's office and told him that he killed 30 people, saying, quote, "Well, I can't think about this right now. I've got things to do," end quote, and ignored his attorney's advice to see the psychiatrist. Gacy had reflected on his last day of freedom as being hazy and recalling he knew he was going to be arrested. He wanted to spend the last day visiting with friends and saying his farewells. On his way home, he stopped at a gas station and gave a small bag of weed to the attendant, who then gave it to the detectives that were following Gacy, saying that Gacy told him, quote, "The end is coming for me. These guys are going to kill me," end quote. He then went to his friend Ronald Rhodes' home, gave him a hug, and burst into tears, saying, quote, "I've been a bad boy. I killed 30 people, give or take a few," end quote. After this, Gacy went to Cram and Rossi's. It is reported while driving there that he was clutching a rosary to his chin and praying. Once there, he confessed to them that he had told his attorney, and he asked Cram to take him to his father's gravesite. While Gacy was doing his errands, the police were outlining the formal draft for another search warrant, specifying to look in the crawl space for Robert Peist. Because of Gacy's new showing of erratic behavior, the police feared he was feeling suicidal, so they actually arrested him for the possession and distribution of weed to keep him in custody. Once the search warrant was granted, Gacy denied anyone being buried under the crawl space, but told them there was a boy buried under the garage. He said the boy was killed in self-defense. This is the I don't believe you phase. Yeah. Once the police got to Gacy's home, they found that the sub pump had been turned off, which caused the crawl space to flood. They plugged it back in and had to wait for the water to clear out. Evidence technician Daniel Genty entered the crawl space first. He went to the southwest area and began digging. Within minutes, they had unearthed a human arm bone. He yelled out to the investigators that they could charge Gacy with murder, saying, quote, "I think this place is full of kids," end quote. The first victims they found were too old to be Peist. However, the more they dug, the sheer amount of offal they found is just staggering. Once word got back to Gacy about what they had found in the crawl space and how he was going to be charged with murder, Gacy said he wanted to, quote, "clear the air," and end quote, and let them know he knew the arrest was inevitable and had to spend the night with his lawyer. On December 22nd, with his lawyer present, Gacy confessed to the police that he murdered 30 young men and boys and how they had entered his home willingly. He also told the police that he had only dug 5 of the graves himself and his employees dig the rest. He also told them he actually had future plans of concealing the bodies even more by covering it with concrete. How much worse would this be if he actually was able to do that? All those families left wondering, what if? It's not easy to lose a family member or someone you love, but to lose them in a brutal way makes it so much harder. And if you never truly know, and to never truly know, to live with the not knowing is a terrible torture for those families. Gacy was questioned specifically about Robert Peist. He confessed to luring him into his home and strangling him, sleeping next to his body, and then put him in the river. The police took Gacy, his attorney, and Gacy's older sister to the I-55 bridge to pinpoint the locations of where he disposed of the victims in the river. They then took him to his house so he could mark the garage where the other victim was buried. Gacy also drew the police a rough diagram of the crawl space area to show where the bodies were buried. Once a victim was found, they were placed in a body bag and removed by the morgue one by one, or removed to the morgue one by one. On February 6, 1980, Gacy was put on trial for all 33 murders in Cook County, Illinois. Louis Garapio presided over the trial, and the jury was selected from Rockford because of all the press coverage of the case was getting to Cook County. Leading up to the trial, Gacy underwent 300 hours of psychological tests performed by a panel of psychiatrists to make sure that he was mentally competent to stand trial. He actually tried to convince them he had multiple personality disorder. He claimed to have 4: the clown, the politician, the civic-minded contractor, and a policeman he called Jack Hanley, or Bad Jack. Ooh. And what he confessed to the police were things done by Jack, who did not approve of homosexuality and viewed male sex workers as, quote, weak, stupid, and degraded scum, end quote. Gacy's attorney tried the whole not guilty by reason of insanity, and that Gacy had a Jekyll and Hyde thing going on. They even had 3 psychiatric experts testify they found Gacy was a paranoid schizophrenic with multiple personalities. Of course, the prosecution presented that Gacy was sane and in full control of his cognitive, and he knew what he was doing. That's pretty much it. He knew what he was doing, and he knew it was wrong. They had their own witnesses testify to the premeditation and efforts he took to hide what he was doing. On February 18th, Robert Stein testified the bodies recovered from Gacy's property were badly decomposed and some were skeletal remains. From the ones that were autopsied, 13 had died of asphyxia, 6 of ligature strangulation, 1 of multiple stab wounds, and 10 by undetermined ways. Gacy's team told the jury that all 33 died of accidental erotic asphyxia, but Stein said that was highly improbable. On February 21st, one of the few survivors, Jeffrey Rignall, testified and gave a recounting of his torture by Gacy in March of 1978. I need my cookie. Okay. The young man gave his full testimony while weeping and even vomiting during his cross-examination. He was excused from further testimony because of how traumatizing it is. During the course of the trial, other victims would also testify against Gacy and tell the court about what had happened to them. During the 5th week of the trial, Gacy had the audacity to send a letter to the judge asking for a mistrial, stating he did not approve of his lawyers using the insane plea, they didn't allow him to testify, and not enough medical witnesses were called to his defense, and the police were lying about his verbal confession. The judge informed Gacy both counsels had not been denied any opportunity or funds to gather witnesses. And under the law, Gacy had the choice to testify, and he could have said as much in court. Which is true. That is everybody's right. You can say in court you want to testify. Even if your attorney is telling you no. The judge may yell at you because you're speaking out of turn, but you can. You can let it be known that you want to testify. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours and found him guilty of 33 charges of murder and sexual assault and for taking indecent liberties with a child. At that time, that was the most murder convictions any one person had been found guilty of in the U.S. history. During sentencing, the jury deliberated for just over 2 hours and sentenced him to death for each murder committed. Gacy's gonna die 33 times, and he earned each and every one of them. Gacy was then transferred to the Maynard Correctional Center and was there for 14 years. He did appeal his conviction multiple times, but it never got overturned. The final appeal went to the Supreme Court, and they upheld the court's decision on September 29, 1988, and his execution date was then set for May 10, 1994. And on that day, he was executed via lethal injection, and his last words were reported as, quote, "kiss my ass," end quote. So, quick thing about that. They actually had an issue with his lethal injection. The tube got clogged. Yeah. So, they actually had to do a huge investigation after Gacy's execution to find out why that happened. So they're now way more better, I guess. I don't know how I feel about the death penalty. I don't think it's right to kill people, but some people deserve it. It's a case-by-case basis for me, I guess. John Wayne Gacy is still considered one of the most vile killers of U.S. history. He was a monster, and the world is better off without him. But that doesn't make things any easier for his surviving relatives. There are multiple documentaries on him that can cover more than I can on here, as this was a very long episode to do. I know it took me longer than normal, but there was so much ugly that I had to step back every once in a while to compose myself. I have a son, like I said, who is around the age of the bulk of his victims. So this one really hits a nerve. And please, if you or someone you know are missing a loved one from these time frames in the Chicago area, please connect with the Cook County Sheriff's Office at 773-674-8425. There are still a few boys who have yet to be identified, and while it won't bring them back, closure is good for the healing process. Also, fun fact for us creepy people like me, according to serial killer detector Thomas Hargrove, there are more than 2,000 active serial killers in the U.S. At any given time. Since not all serial killers get caught and identified, it's impossible to say exactly how many serial killers are known, and that's as of July 18th, 2021. I usually try to end these episodes on a happier tone, but this one is just so dark. There's just dark all over. Good riddance to bad rubbish. Hold your family friends tight and never miss an opportunity to let them know that they are important to you. Thank you so much for hanging out with me again, and remember, in a world where you can choose to do anything, choose kindness. Bye, guys. Okay.